Hey, everybody, welcome again to another great webinar recording with Grant and Andrew Eckstrom here with Succurri. We've got part two of maybe one of our biggest hit videos out there on weaponized AI. And welcome, Grant. Welcome, Andrew.
Thank you, Tony.
Looking forward to our conversation today. That'll be great. So what are we going to go through? Well, before we do that, we need a little like commercial announcement because at Succurri, we talk about a lot of these things on different webinars, different aspects of IT, and really helping you solve business problems with the technology that's in play. And although today's going to be about weaponized AI, and we're going to talk a little bit about that, really it relates back to how do you minimize security risks in your business? How do you handle that? Because AI is impacting security, and we're going to go through some of those things. So, um, check us out on YouTube. Here's a QR code. Go scan this video. Look at the other videos. There's great information out there. These guys are always on top of it. I think they're ahead of the game when it comes to IT providers out there, and the information they share and how they share it. Also, like and subscribe. We continue to grow that subscriber base. It's getting all this great information. So we really appreciate that. So what's today about? Well, we're going to go a little bit about history, and it's kind of strange for me to say like, oh, back in the mid 80s, um, now we're 2026. We're in the future now. So it's kind of crazy. We'll go through a little bit about how IT security has kind of changed over the years a little bit and how AI is impacting that landscape. Um, Identity is the new perimeter. We'll get into details on that and what that really means, because security has had to change, and that's where zero trust comes into play. We'll go through some controls, IT controls that should be like the bare minimum, just so you have that. And then we'll get into a little bit about what the impact, what the challenge is, and when you do have downtime, how to look at that, how insurance providers are insuring businesses, and what that whole can of soup looks like in terms of also how do you calculate the cost of downtime, and how do you look at your business impacted by this technology of AI and security, and how to stay secure. So really looking forward to this today, and this is part two of this original conversation. So about a year ago, almost to the I know to the month, I don't know about to the day, but almost a year ago, we had weaponized AI webinar and talked a little bit about what you guys went through. So maybe Grant, tell us about what you guys did back then a year ago.
Yeah, it was a year ago or two. Like,
Was it?
it's
It feels like three, but
right. So yeah, so when I started seeing AI start erupting into the security space, we started seeing tools being automated, and AI being the engine to automate those. And one of them was a penetration test, and what that means is basically uh, where a human was doing this before, they're sending hackers into networks and trying to see if they can compromise the network. AI was starting to do that very efficiently, and to be brutally honest, we had humans go through ours, and humans missed things that AI picked up very quickly. And so what you're seeing here on the screen is an actual attack that happened in our network. And as you can see, the timeline that it took to compromise this was pretty dang quick. Um, and this was all done through a very, very efficient, ruthless AI model that was able to take over our network. And so that was an eye-opening experience for us, right? Like we've been in the security game for quite some time. Obviously, we consider our network one of the most secure out there. obviously not, you know, I hate saying secure because that terminology is so vague, right? There's no such thing as 100% secure, but we spend a lot of time and effort making sure that we put in all the controls in place and we test the controls, and we had humans looking at it and everything looked good. And then obviously putting this into place, it made us very ashamed of what we thought we had in place and really was not. Um, and so we wanted to kind of recap this today because while this technology we used a couple years ago is kind of, it's not the technology that we're going to talk about today, it's the methodology. And the methodology is how AI is using attack vectors in a very efficient and very expedient way to attack people. And so, like I said, we talked about um, the penetration test, but the reality is that most attacks from weaponized AI are happening at like the phishing level, or they're happening at the lost or stolen credential levels. And so we kind of get into this slide here, and phishing has always been a very high point of where attacks are happening. The reason why, and we'll get a little deeper into it later into the call, but is the human, right? I can put in all these different security mechanisms in place, but I cannot stop an employee from clicking on something, right? I might be able to help mitigate the damage after they clicked on it. I can train them not to click on something, but sometimes, a lot of the times, they're still going to click on something. And that's why you always see that the phishing threats at a very, very high rate. Now, how AI has impacted that is that the emails of the phishing emails are extremely well put together. It used to be that you can look at an email and go, oh, there's some grammatical errors, typos. That's a phishing email, right? That is a time of the past. AI writes better than I can, right? So I would say that seeing a grammatically incorrect email is less likely to be a phishing email than it was, a couple years ago. Um, they look like there's only a small detail, even as a professional, that I might be able to pick out that's saying, okay, yeah, that's a phishing email. And so to the normal eye, it's very easy to trick somebody into clicking on something.
I know in the last year, more than ever, we'll get into my story later, but more than ever, I've sent messages like, is this real to people? Or what is this? Getting into practicing, what you guys have been talking about for a long time, which is, there's where these come in is mostly the they get credentials from you. So a year ago, we had this slide and say, this is about the percentage of types of attacks where they come into a business at. Do you lose or did someone steal your laptop? Did they find their way into the network? So this was a year ago. Now, if we fast forward to today, how things have changed, I want to show a slide that we kind of put together and walk me through this, Grant, and what
Yeah,
has changed and why do you think that is, and how has AI impacted all of this?
absolutely. So if you look at the phishing and credential theft, that has obviously gone up a significant amount. That is directly related to the efficiencies of AI. The reason why is because you can do things on mass scale. You can do it very quickly and very efficiently. And so we're going to continue to see phishing. Like if we're looking at the crystal ball for, a recap for next year, phishing is going to continue to get higher. And the reason why is that that's the one thing that we can't protect as cybersecurity professionals. The only way we can get that to decrease is going to come from a culture of cybersecurity in the organization where it's really, really important to the top level management, and it flows down. Um, and we have to get better at that. We have to get better at training. We have to get better at, like you pointed out, having some level of, paranoia, healthy paranoia, as I like to call
Yeah.
it,
Right.
about when you get an email, is this real? And it's funny that you mentioned, Tony, that's one of the things that you do is like, is this real? That's actually a fundamental thought process in zero trust, which we'll talk about here in a little bit. But you always want to verify that what you're looking at is real. Supply chain attacks. So we didn't really talk about it last year, but supply chain attacks are on a significant rise. Reason being is that you have, why go attack the individual when I can get one person versus I go attack like the MSP? And I hate to talk about that because obviously we're MSPs, but it is true. Like MSPs are under attack. Software vendors that are installing software on your computers or cloud are under attack because I can get access to hundreds of thousands or maybe millions of accounts by going directly to the source. So that one is gone up dramatically. The topic that we talked about with network intrusion in last year, obviously that's down. And there's a reason for that. As people move away from the office, they start having hybrid work environments. They're all SaaS-based software that they're using. You can connect from anywhere. Attacking the network at the office doesn't have the payout that it used to. And so you're going to continue to see that go down. Inadvertent disclosures. Yeah, I mean that you'd probably see that bounce up and down, over time. Lost or stolen devices are going to have some level of impact. That's like, hey, I left my laptop in the car and it got feet and walked away, or somebody stole my cell phone. Those are going to kind of bounce around as that happens. And misconfigurations is on the rise. So misconfigurations, think of it as systems not being patched, or your SaaS environments like your Microsoft 365 not
Yeah.
having the proper security controls in place to prevent or alert you on a potential breach. Not I'm not sure if everybody knows, but Microsoft's mindset has always been, we're going to allow it to work for the easiest way possible, not the securest way, but the easiest way. So you get in the system, you can start using it, and it works really well, great. And people typically go, "Oh, it's working, it's fine. I'll leave it alone and move on." The reality of it is that there needs to be a ton of work that needs to be done on the backside to secure those platforms so your data and your users stay protected. And so that's not happening. And you'll continue to see that rise as people move more to the cloud and leave all these configurations that really should have been addressed, and they're not getting fixed.
Yeah. If you've ever had your website hacked, it tends to be system misconfiguration, or they haven't updated a plugin, or which is a misconfiguration in and of itself.
Yeah.
Um, so interesting how things are changing because you're talking about the network. Used to be offices on premise, everybody goes into the office. Now it's like the wild, wild west out there where everybody can work from home or work remotely. And there's a freedom to that. But from a security standpoint, it's like, whoa, like this is a little bit out of control. So I'm glad there's people like you watching this stuff and these trends as you go through this. So um, now we're going to get into talking about the impact of AI. It has an impact everywhere on all types of things, but specifically in terms of keeping a business secure, keeping the technology secure, the information secure, the money secure for businesses. Um, Talk to me about that. How have you? What do you guys see?
Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah,
Oh,
go
sorry.
ahead, Andrew. Go ahead. Yeah, go for it.
So what we're seeing is cyber crimes that would have taken a team of 20 really qualified people now can be executed much more simply and easily and faster using AI technologies. And so, like on this picture, you have several things. You have speed, scale, and sophistication. And so, there's kind of three dimensions to that, right? So AI makes everything happen faster. So that's speed. It can do more at one time. So instead of it taking 20 people to do your hack, it's going, you got one AI, but it's this, you can do 100 people's worth of work, and it's sophisticated. So it doesn't miss any details. So like that's this three dimensions of, how AI works is what's really giving us power, because one human can only work so fast. They have to sleep, they only work for so many hours, and so AI doesn't care. You just throw hardware at it and it just goes faster. Scale, once again, you just add more processing resources, it does more. And sophistication, humans get lazy, or like, the subtle details, you just can't do all of them. So a hacker might exploit like one or two vulnerabilities, AI is exploiting all of them simultaneously, and then every time it gets a layer deep, it goes through and does all the others. And so, if you saw that picture, or well, in the picture Grant showed earlier of the breach profile of when we ran the weaponized AI against us, it was 17 minutes and 15 seconds. And if you saw it had like several branches, those are three paths that it simultaneously explored. One person, one human wouldn't have been able to do that. And a human couldn't have hacked our systems in 17 minutes and 15 seconds. So it just shows you when you apply speed, scale, and sophistication, it's like the killer combination. And that's what we're seeing with AI.
So capabilities, AI is impacting capabilities in every dimension of a business in our lives, really,
Mhm.
if you think about it, with these three, speed, scale, and sophistication. It
Yeah.
just, in this world, it happens to impact security.
Well, in cybercrime historically generates a 13% return on investment. And like almost everybody would love that return. So financially, it makes a lot of sense to invest in these technologies and to do cybercrime. You just obviously it's against the law, so don't. But from a financial standpoint, there's a lot of return for the investment.
Well, and to point out, you said, it's against the law. Most of this is happening from outside the country, right? They're coming from hotbed territories are countries that are the government kind of turns a blind eye. In some cases, it's even supported by the government. And so where you had attacks that were happening at the corporate office behind the network, that would have been being carried out by attackers that were potentially in a local area. These attacks are happening from all around the world, and legal issues are rarely a deterrent.
Yeah, interesting. That's 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 a whole nother conversation. Um, as we get into this a little bit more, basically, this is the graph, right? I don't know, maybe we should put it going straight up. And you talked about it earlier, Grant, like the speed at which they can happen, or maybe even the speed at which they change attacks or information, and just the volume of attacks I know has gone up. How many emails do you get that it's like, oh, you have to have technology on your phone that, looks at calls. But if you look at the majority of attacks come from phishing, this curve is everything. AI is impacting everything this way. It just so happens that it's looking to do malicious. It has malicious intent, let's say.
Yeah,
Um,
and I think the visual that you want to take away from this, right? So, we'll stick with the fishing as in like fishing for, so you're casting a net, right? And prior to AI being released in this form, the net was pretty wide, but had some, the holes that the fish get caught in the webbing of the net were pretty big too. With AI, the net is substantially larger and the holes are smaller. So because they're more sophisticated, they can get a wider range. And so it's a pure numbers game, right? Like the more emails I send out, the higher the percentage of people that are going to click on it. And so if you can send out all these phishing emails and you're getting, like Andrew said, 13%, well, that's a very scalable process, right? If I send more emails, I get more people that click on it. And then I start thinking about it from a business perspective. I'm like, oh, okay, well, if I tighten this up and I actually increase my percentage to 15% or 16% success rate on a click, that number multiplies. It's ridiculous on how many more people that you're going to potentially compromise and access to data that you weren't supposed to.
well, one that I've seen out there, and I don't know how you categorize this one. It may be phishing, it might be something else, but where it's like I get access to Tony's email and I send email from Tony, who's a trusted source, to someone like Grant or Andrew asking for information. Is that spoofing or phishing, or is it a version of phishing? How does, because that's one I see out there quite a bit.
Yeah, I mean, you're potentially it's more of a spear phishing at that point because it's a very targeted. You have a couple things that are happening there, right? So you have some level of lateral movement where somebody's already getting into an account and potentially trying to access the next account to be able to see if they've got more permissions or access to better data. Where we see that happen a lot is you get access to an assistant, right? An assistant clicks on something, well, then they're going to go, okay, well, who does this assistant know and who would they communicate with? And so an assistant might communicate with the CEO. And so now that the CEO is getting emails from the assistant that are coming from their account and kind of remove some of those barriers of determining is this email correct or not. And so then the CEO might click on a Word document like, hey, here's the presentation I prepared for you. Click on it. They click on the Word document. Now the CEO is infected, right? And so that you just continue to build over and over again, trying to get more access to systems. Obviously, CEO being one of them that is kind of like the top of the heap. Um, maybe you're trying to get access to the accountant, right? Where's the money at? Where's the power? Where's the money? And that's where you're trying to go.
Got it. Got it. So things have changed. We identity is your new perimeter. What does that mean?
Like talked about earlier, the days of being in the office, at least 100% of the time are gone. And with everything moving to the cloud and not just maybe one cloud, you might have multiple cloud systems, right? I think, Andrew, if we started doing a count on ours, we probably have 20, maybe 30 different cloud systems out there. And, in some cases, they all have their own independent authentication systems. And so, now you've got 20 usernames and passwords they have to work with. You maybe have, if you're doing things somewhat correctly, you would have multi-factor for all those. You have devices that are mobile devices, so phones, tablets, laptops, and they're working from coffee shops or potentially around the country. Maybe you've tiptoed into the virtual assistants, and so you're offshoring some of your tasks. Yeah, so I'm like the perimeter of being in that office and showing up to work every day is gone. Um, yeah,
And it's the person that's the weak link versus the wall to the getting into the wall to the office, which no longer exists. It's the person that travels around with the right credentials or the right access that they're after.
yeah, your identity is you, right? And so your identity may have, you know, 20 different passwords. It may have 60 different passwords and different accounts that you're accessing. And so that is what you have to protect now versus, and I'm not saying you shouldn't protect the network, right? I'd say that's day one kind of stuff. That's something that
Yeah.
you get that taken care of and then kind of move your way up. But protecting the identity is where everybody's like, if I was going to, so kind of going back to the phishing comment, if I'm sending you a phishing email, I'm trying to get your identity, right? So if I get access to your email, if you start thinking about like, hey, if I'm going to do a password reset, where do your password resets go? They go to your email account, right? And so if I get access to the email, I can slowly take over your identity just because I got access to one account. Um, and so that's why you have to protect the identity versus, well, you have to protect all of them, but the identity is where the target is.
So in terms of what damage somebody can do, we talk about blast radius. What does that mean? And explain that to the untrained.
Yeah. So, yeah, Andrew, do you want to run with that?
Yeah, so I can discuss that. So what happens, like Grant mentioned, now hackers are logging in. They're not breaching your account. They're logging in with your credentials. So detection becomes really hard because the logins look authentic and you don't have like systems are becoming more sophisticated to detect behavior changes, but they're not like authentication is authentication. You're in the system. And so I'll give you the example like Microsoft 365 this happens on a daily basis is that people's accounts get breached, someone logs into their email and they sit in that email for days, weeks, months and without detection because if they know how to be like they hide what they're doing, they make sure they don't make any waves, and they're in there for a really long time. And so systems just really aren't designed to detect that kind of attack yet. I mean, they're getting better. So what we really talk about is making sure that your blast radius, or the amount of impact that that specific breach has, can be limited. And that, on this, the right hand picture with the golden circle, like that would represent the blast radius. That's as far as a hacker can go in a system that they breach. And you really want to have like concentric rings throughout the various systems that you have, so that even if they get in, they're hitting that first ring, they don't make it to the next one, they don't make it to the next one after that, or if they do, there's a barrier at each level, because it takes time to detect them. And so, we use a system called SaaS alerts in Microsoft 365 that detects behaviors that are weird. So we're detecting these things really quickly, but ultimately we still don't want that person to get very far once they're in Microsoft 365 before we detect them. So we really reduce what the accounts can do and how much damage they can cause before they're detected. So that's the real goal, is reduce the amount of damage that a breach can have, regardless of how fast it's detected.
So two
Well,
things on that. One, SaaS Alerts needs to pay for this webinar now. That was
Yeah.
the plug. Second part I want to point out is this is pointing out something that security professionals have been talking about for a long time, but it's a hard concept to understand, is assume breach, right? Like this is not about like, hey, how am I going to keep them out? It is assuming that you have been breached, and now how do you mitigate the damage? And
but
and that's a hard concept to, like, people are like, hey, no, I don't want to get breached at all. I'm like, well, that ship sailed, right? Your
well,
users are going
yeah,
to click on
that
something.
isn't that your okay, so I'm pushing back here a little bit. But isn't that what people pay you to do, is to stop breaches from happening? Don't let people in, be quote unquote secure.
Yeah, great question. So we can put all the security controls in place. It still comes back to, I cannot control what your employees do, right? If I put an email in front of an employee and they click on it, no matter what it is, I can't stop that, right? I can mitigate the damage, right? I can have one of those rings that is there to stop it being a catastrophic event,
Right.
but I can't stop that little red dot, right? Like that little red dot is going to happen whether I'm there or not.
Right.
Um, it's up to the management team and the ownership team to build a culture that security is important, right? And people take it seriously, and potentially that there are consequences for not taking it seriously, right? I do know companies that look at job positions, and if they have somebody that's in a high profile position that is a that has a lot of risky behavior, and when I say risky behavior, like they're clicking on things or they're communicating information that they probably shouldn't, they might move that person to a different position because that they don't want it to be a company ending event, because that person has the tendency to do things. And that's after you go through, trying to do some, employee remediation, like, hey, let's get you into training. Let's try, let's try to fix this problem.
Yeah.
Psychologically, sometimes that is just what that person is going to do.
So that's what zero trust is about. Is that right? Like the
Yeah,
mitigating
yeah,
the blast radius.
yeah. The fundamental idea behind zero trust is assume everything is bad, right? Assume that you've been breached, and that every action has to have some sort of verification, and that you have to continuously verify over and over again. And most business owners are going to like, that sounds like it's going to slow my company down. And the answer is it's not. Actually, I'd argue that it helps speed things up, because once you start getting into the zero trust, all these little things that are happening on the peripheral side of distractions go away. Um, but yeah, so the fundamentals are, you never trust, you always verify, and then you limit the blast radius.
And so tell me just a little bit about what you meant by the distractions go away.
Yeah, so if, like, when you have, like, okay, now I've got this network over here, and I've got all these systems over here, and I've got these systems over here, and you start putting in zero trust methodology and systems to allow connectivity, you now can see how all this flows back and forth. And there's different spots where you're having to re-authenticate. And a re-authentication doesn't have to be like, I have to type my password in every single time, right? It might be I have to approve something that's taking place.
Right.
Um, there's different ways of going about it. It might be that you have like a passwordless system where you're using security tokens or like pass keys. It might
Mhm.
be a push system, but you're going through and so the human is having to verify that the action that is happening is indeed happening by them.
Right. Right.
Yeah. And on one of the things too on zero trust, so we implemented zero trust after the weaponized AI. And what's interesting, like this is, I guess, like one of the biggest parts of this update. I think if there's the one thing to keep an eye out for, this was how we solved this problem for our customers. We recognized when we ran our weaponized AI that the antivirus software we had at the time, which we still have around in some cases, and it's a good software package, it just couldn't keep up. And so I think it took like a couple of days for the antivirus company to recognize that something had gone sideways, but our data was gone, like effectively from the testing standpoint, like we were breached and then way beyond that before they recognized. So we realized that traditional antivirus, no matter how fancy, was not going to solve this weaponized AI problem. And the zero trust community had started to become more prevalent, and we recognized that until you're in a situation where all of the computers and all of the systems don't trust anything unless you have implicitly told them to, there's no way you're going to survive a weaponized AI attack with traditional reactive scanning methods. So you had to actually have proactive restrictions and then an approval process. What throws other MSPs off in this process is it's a huge commitment. We did this as one of like our big year value adds to our customers. We implemented a system called Threat Locker, and it's one of the industry premier systems for MSPs. It took Grant, like, I think you took 6 months of your time plus one of our security engineers. This was an expensive project. I mean, tens of thousands of dollars of time and labor on our part, which we did not charge customers for. We felt it was absolutely necessary to invest in our customers and bring this next level of technology. Grant did an awesome job. You can make it so that the transition has low impact. What we find is like what we see other MSPs doing is they just turn on a zero trust system. Every one of their customers freaks out on the same day because they can't do anything, and then they just turn it off and they're like, "I'm done." And so the zero trust system just sits on the shelf and they go back to antivirus. We saw that, so we did our research ahead of time. We figured out how to build our libraries of permissions and denies. We implemented slowly, and it was expensive. And that's really the trade-off is we paid in time and time and salary for a successful implementation versus other people would try and go quick to market and would fail because it was just too complex to do that. But right now for our customers, they all have zero trust technology, at least if they're in a managed support package with us. And it's really changed how we do business now. Now it's like very calm. We do get the occasional frustrated email from an executive at 3 a.m. on Saturday morning because he was trying to install some program and he was late for a quote. But ultimately, like, we've got it pretty smooth. So the big challenge with zero trust is that initial hump, and then once you get over it, it's okay. It's worth the investment. So for us, this is like we feel very comfortable now that if there was a massive weaponized AI attack, we'd have at least some chance of surviving it, and we'd detect it really fast because our systems would trigger the second things started trying to happen. And so that's where we are with zero trust.
Got it.
And one small correction on the 3 a.m. So it's not because they're trying to install software that is known to their environment. It is that they're trying to install software that has never been seen in their environment. And I'll be honest with you, the 3Ms are rarely ever business related.
Yeah.
So, I see them all. I get calls in the middle of the night, and I'm like, yeah, I mean, obviously, you're gonna do what you want to do. It's your own business, right? But yeah, it's if it's been seen in the environment, it's allowed, right? That's the point. We know what it is. It's a friendly face. Where it comes really effective is that uh, the significant reduction of risk for a business owner is that if it hasn't been seen before, that's where it starts getting questioned, right? That's the process of verification of like, should this
Yeah.
really be in the environment in the first place? And then at that point, a team of security experts, including myself, get involved. We look at it and saying, okay, is this something that really should be in the environment? And then it's allowed to permit it going forward. And so anybody else in that organization most likely will be able to put that software on their computer as well. Um, but yeah, the three AMs are far and few between on business stoppage.
Yeah. So what you're saying, Succurri, you don't judge. It's just security. No
Yeah.
judging, just
It-
security.
yeah, no, I'm like, I would say, back in the days, right, where, you're locking down everything because that was the thing to do. And like, from a business owner perspective, I'm like, hey, it's your company, right? You're entitled to do whatever you want to do. My job is to inform you of the risks that action potentially has.
So speaking of that, like back in the day versus talk to me through like where we've been, and you've already mentioned some of this about, everybody meets in an office, but talk to me about security in the past and where we're at and where you think we're headed.
Yeah, so obviously with the addition of AI, and the only thing I've found that is actually a true defense mechanism against it is the AI side of things, right? So early in the days, computers didn't even have antivirus on their computers, right? And the viruses were nuisances of anything. Like they were built by probably IT people that thought it'd be pretty funny just to have a computer just go into a boot loop, right? It was like, ah, ha, ha, and you get, it was a pain, but it wasn't damaging, right? And then you start getting into some of the technology, like some of what they call worms, and then they started shutting down massive networks. And then all of a sudden, okay, this is becoming a problem because we can't work. I think of a hospital, all the computers getting shut down, right? There's life consequences there. And then you start getting into where it becomes significantly monetized, and you've got ransomware coming into play, where all your stuff is being encrypted and your systems don't go down, or some of them do, but you want your data back, you have to pay a certain amount, right? And then you start getting into, okay, well, ransomware is still effective methodology. That might be one of the tools that's being used in these modernized breaches. Now it's about, okay, how much information can I get out of it? How much money can I extract? And then I'm going to ransomware you on the way out. Like that's just the piece de resistance as they walk out the door, just to kind of see whatever last dollars they can pull out of your pocketbook. And all these things are because it's been looked upon in a reactive standpoint, right? Like these are like, hey, or we're trying to detect these things before they happen, and maybe we're going to get it right, and maybe we're not. But the reality is like an IT professional or cybersecurity professional has to be correct 100% of the time for that methodology to be effective. And the attacker only has to be effective once to be able to get in. And those odds, you can't match those odds, right? Like that's just impossible to ever do. And so you start looking at the zero trust side of things, and it just gives you a better playing field, of saying, hey, I'm going to assume that this is an attack every single time. And then you have to look at it or verify that it is indeed supposed to be there. And I'm not saying that zero trust is foolproof, right? Like that, like I said, there's no such thing as 100% security. And anybody that tells you that is lying. But it's just a much better methodology to stop the overwhelming amount of attacks that are starting to happen and the different methodologies that are being used.
So as we go into the future, um, there's some things around, what are some practical things we do? How do we determine what the cost of downtime is if we do get attacked, or when we do get attacked? If there is downtime and you don't have some of these things like zero trust, that methodology at play, and those, some of those things, if we don't train our employees, by the way, looking at what you and your employees and your teams do um, in terms of behavior, because that's where the biggest gap in security is with human behavior. So we're going to go through some of these, and just as I'm walking through, um, talk to me about like the basics you should have in terms of controls. They're listed here, but talk to me why these are the basics.
I'll let Andrew take this one, but I do want to point out the irony that this is the exact same one we had up last year, and it hasn't improved,
It's
right?
actually gotten worse, and
Yeah.
I can tell you why. But if you just go back to the last slide for just a second, Tony, if I pull out my crystal ball, what's the future landscape look like? Truthfully, it's been fascinating to watch over the last 25 years of my career, how willing people are to embrace new technology and how willing they are to have their identity stolen, their money stolen, their data taken advantage of. There's just a lot of passiveness that I find. And so if I was to look at this, I think really the tipping point would be either significant regulation and enforcement at a governmental level, which we are not seeing. Enforcement is not anywhere near what it should be. Regulation is pretty minimal, and people complain about what we have, but like you'd have to have significant forces above, or like insurance companies likely will be the ones that will force the majority of change. I think the big change is going to come is finally when weaponized AI does attack people. And we talked about this yesterday in kind of our warm up discussion was until you feel the pain, right? And it actually triggers that very primitive lizard brain part of you that says, I never want to feel that anxiety, that adrenaline, that fear, that panic ever again. You just don't have a convert. And Grant and I have seen this our entire career. Like we talk to people, we let them know that they're at risk, and they're like, yeah, but I'm going to roll the dice. And then the issue happens, and they are fervent. Like whatever we recommend after that, they do, and it's like they are on point, and they're an ideal customer. So not that I'm saying like I want the entire world to get crypto locked, but I wouldn't mind if a bunch did because we'd be really busy, helping people out. So I think people just are going to have to experience it. It's like the school of hard knocks, right? So
It
once,
is, yeah.
yeah. So I think that's really what I see going forward. As far as AI goes, it is evolving so rapidly. I don't even like to give suggestions on what a year from now will look like, but I know it'll be different than we are today. But let's go back to that original slide and let's have all three of those. Back to the or go forward
Yeah.
one more slide.
Back to the Future. Yeah,
Yeah,
got
let's go back to the future to
it.
that slide.
Um, well, before you get going here, I can tell you from personal experience because last year I got my LinkedIn account hacked and my name changed from Tony Lale to Tony Lynn. I suddenly graduated from Stanford, which I wish that would have true, but it wasn't. Um, so all these things started happening, and it was almost like a blink of an eye because I'm the user. We'll talk a little bit about profiles, but I was on a call and I got a security level thing that I needed to reset something on LinkedIn. And I just gave permission to reset my password. It wasn't to my email, it was to someone else. It happened in like a second. And I was like, I think I just Yep, I got like hours later. And what was interesting, my account on LinkedIn started to just grow in the things I was interested in, which was not me. All the imagery, like they started just swapping out the account. Why? Because I have 20,000 followers
Yeah.
plus on LinkedIn on my account. So they saw that as leverage to proliferate information. They even
Or
put
to
in their
attack
number.
20,000 people.
Yeah, they even put in their number. So influence, I think, is also a motivation.
Yeah.
But I can tell you, I went through all the visceral, like, oh, moments. My heart rate goes up. I was like, what else do they have access to? Just becomes, you know, paranoia. But I still am like the behavior. I have to change the behavior. And I really think that's why this slide is still the same. And you guys can talk a little about why it's worse now, but it's human behavior has to change over time. And it really doesn't, unfortunately, until it's, like you say, regulated or something happens to me. Now I've got to do something about it or
Yeah.
So,
change.
so quick housekeeping item. Sorry, Tony, we have a typo there. It says password list authentication. It's password less. So like no passwords. So that's so just a little
Oh,
housekeeping item. Sorry.
okay. My bad.
But so this slide, this was our one takeaway slide last year. If you had only one takeaway this slide. We ordered things a little differently in the last slide. So, or in the last year, it was first the strong passwords, password list authentication. It was MFA. That was number one. We're like, just do this. And then we had patch management, lifecycle management, like keep a clean house, just do the basics so your systems are patched. And then we had employee training and awareness. And over the last year, strong passwords, passwordless authentication, MFA, that's fairly easy. Those are controls we can push onto customers. You just have to get approval. Like you tell the boss, hey, we need to do this. Microsoft's enforcing it. You're at risk. Can we push it out? And they're like, okay. And then we deal with the little road bumps and the sharp edges until we get it smoothed out.
And
Patch management.
so hold on a sec. So password less to make the correction. That's
Correct.
where I go in and I log in with Google or I log in with
Yeah,
Microsoft.
passkey or like a
Passkey.
FIDO token or something like that. So
Got it.
Make it basically you want to make it easy so that if a person only has to manage one credential, that one credential could be really challenging to breach. But if it's only one, that helps, it helps that process. But
Got it.
so what I'm trying to say here is our priority was passwords and MFA, patch management, lifecycle management, and both of those from an IT standpoint, we have a lot of control to help push that initiative, and we pushed really hard and have really dialed that in. So employee training was the one we hit, that was third in our list, but we've reordered that to number one. And what we recognized is, like Grant said earlier, is no matter how many controls we put in place, the employee still has to do their job, which still allows a certain amount of latitude, like clicking on an email and giving their credentials away. So they give their username and password away to somebody. So we realized, this was version one of how do you do employee training and awareness was we had always told the customer, you need to be more secure. And it was a very nebulous, kind of vague, statement. And we didn't get a lot of traction from it. And so last year, we spent a lot of time and energy transforming you're not secure into very specific actionable items. So, like in our tools that we bring to customers, we can actually tell the customer the employee that is risky and a subset of the behaviors that employee is doing to be risky. I'll give you a couple examples. We have a password management system. And in that password management system, I can tell you which employees are using or not using it. I can tell you which ones have risky passwords. I can tell you which ones have breach passwords. I can tell you which ones have passwords that are not, safe. A year before, I would have just said, you're not secure, right? But now if I can tell you that Jane Doe is not secure and she's doing these things, that's a very actionable item. And our assumption was is if we were able to give business decision makers truly actionable information, we would see a lot of change start happening. And unfortunately, that's not been the case. So that's why we're saying things are actually worse. What we're finding is we give this information, the business decision maker usually doesn't have like the energy to bring it across the finish line. Oh, I have to deal with an employee that doesn't want to deal with this. Oh, that's a process I have to put in place. There's this like barrier to entry and this decision fatigue that comes with that knowledge. And so, we're still working through that process. It's a lot of education. It's, reaffirming, the process. And yes, if I told you last time Jane Doe was insecure, then she probably is this time. But what I'm able to do now is when I meet with customers is I can tell them the story. I'm like, hey, these are the list of people who are doing risky behaviors. This is how they're doing it. I'm actually taking that story and I'm translating it into how I would hack them. And so we go through basically I'm like, this is how I'd hack you. I'd figure out on your website who's a decision maker, and I see, oh, Jane Doe is your controller, so she's got access to money. So I go on the dark web and I find Jane Doe's email, and oh, she's got a list of breach credentials that we know are breached, and I'm like, oh, well, I'm going to go to your email account and I'm going to log in with those credentials until I figure out which one works. And I happen to notice that in the breach credentials, you like increment the number at the end of your password every 3 months. So I'm going to try the next number. Oh, I get in. And now I'm in,
Right.
right? And I know that Jane Doe uses, well, I'm assuming, and I know because I watched the password manager, Jane Doe uses that password across every system she uses. So her blast radius is huge. And because she's a financial decision maker, her blast radius is deep. And so basically, what I would tell them is like, this is how I would attack you. And then I asked the question of, how much money does Jane Doe have access to? And they're like, oh, well, she does a $200,000 payroll every 2 weeks. Like that's what I would take, and I would disappear, and you'd never see me again. So can you handle a $200,000 loss? Unfortunately,
Well,
it's still not turning the wheels as fast as we'd like, but that's how we're trying to help customers, is to make it very personal, and like it's very possible for this case to happen.
but the one thing everybody gets is downtime. Like, yeah, okay, there's a financial loss, but the question of what if your business couldn't work anymore because your computers were locked up? That's downtime. There's a financial impact to that. Walk me through that, and also mix in what insurance companies are doing to kind of figure out what the cost is and how to insure your business if there were a downtime loss. Help me understand the thinking behind that.
I mean, so one is insurance companies woefully underestimated the risks they started assuming 3 to 5 years ago with cybersecurity insurance. They were handing out $1 million policies with zero controls. They'd be like, do you have a username and password that's unique? And you're like, maybe. And they've still given a policy out. And so in the last 3 to 4 years, Grant and I have seen a ton of successful breaches that insurance companies have had to pay out in. And I'm talking like tens of thousands of dollars or more that just we've actually seen, personally. And so to address that, insurance companies have gotten wise. And so now their applications for cybersecurity insurance are every year getting more complex. The last round that I saw were so sophisticated. You have to be a networking and almost a security professional. Like I have to go ask Grant, who's our CISSP, sometimes like, what is this specific question asking about? So like it's requiring an extremely high level of sophistication for an application that a very low sophistication end user is supposed to fill out. So insurance companies are starting to figure it out. They are beginning to demand evidence that you're actually doing these things. So if you say you have multi-factor, if you say you have secure passwords, if you say you have a policy, they're wanting that. I haven't, like in our own customer base, we haven't seen that a ton yet, but it is definitely coming, because what we do see is companies say one thing on the form, but they do something different, and then they get breached. And so the insurance companies are looking for ways now to not cover that company during that breach, because the company basically defrauded the application. So
And if you guys, as the security provider, don't attest to that, and the client says, "Oh yeah, we have these controls in place," to the insurance company to think that they're insured, but then something actually happens and they're not insured, that's where they get themselves into a little hot water.
Yeah, I think that the future of what we're going to see is that they're going to look for attestation from a managed service provider because they want a chain of risk, right? And who can they attack, or who can they go after if something doesn't go as expected? So to Andrew's point, he was talking about how, like you basically fill out the form and it says, under the perjury of law, that I attest that these controls are in place. And obviously you're going to pay for it. So you're like, cool, I got the insurance policy. The reality is that if you don't have those controls in place, they're not paying, right? They're going to come back in with a team of people to verify, one, all the things that you said you had in place are actually in place. They're also going to try to figure out how much damage was done. But I will tell you, your insurance company is not your friend in this scenario, right? They bring in their team of lawyers, they bring in forensics, cybersecurity forensics people, they bring in like media and basically crisis intervention people. But it's not because that they're there to help you, it's because they're there to mitigate the amount of money that they have to pay out.
Yeah.
So they're looking for something that you did wrong that will negate your policy. And so, yeah, going forward, they're probably going to ask for the, evidence that you're doing these things up front, and then they're going to be even tighter when the breach happens, right? They're going to make sure that yes, it was there in place when you had it. Was it in place during the time of breach?
Yeah.
And then they're also going to they're going to come after the providers as well. And so I will tell you from a provider perspective, what's in it for me to sign off on a policy like that and put my company at risk because the owner of a company decides that they don't feel like the security control is helping them or it's hindering their business, right? So there's going to be some interesting changes coming down the line of where responsibility lies and who's going to pay for it. And ultimately, the providers, the IT providers are going to charge us significantly more to take on that level of risk.
Well, isn't that one of the reasons why you guys started providing compliance as a service? Because you had to protect your own company? Like, hey, yeah, I tested to this at one point, but this is an ongoing thing that you have to be doing if something
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah, compliance and security are not one and done, right? Like, oh, I put it in place, it's there, it works, right? Like things change, companies change, and it's possible that, an end user that had something turned on, it somehow got shut off, or you had a compliance regulation that is new this year that you weren't aware about. Like, regulations change all the time, and so you want to make sure that you're staying on top
Yeah.
of all that. Um, so yeah, so
So
go ahead.
I was going to say, so sorry to interrupt there, but we're coming up on time here and uh, you know, talking about change and users and educating people. Wanted to have a little bit of fun with this, but I actually think this is a good tool. I'll volunteer because I'm the clicker. I'm the guy that scrolls and clicks and you know thinking that oh I'm being fast, you know. So walk me through some profiles that you see out there just a little bit, knowing we have, a few minutes to go and I want to leave time for Q&A. But just give me a buzz by of these. We should probably come back to these, but
So,
I think it's a
Tony, I
great way
actually
to
don't
look
think,
at people.
yeah, I don't think you're the clicker, Tony. I think you're the busy executive, right?
Oh,
Because you are in meetings and you're like looking at something, you got stuff going on, you're running a million miles an hour, and you click on something, right? You don't click on everything that gets put in front of you. You have a little bit of healthy paranoia in you, but it does happen because you were busy doing something else. The clicker is that person that like I can put a pizza ad in front of them and they're going to click on it, right? Or like, hey,
yeah,
your
that's
your your Google account password got changed. Was this you? Click on this link, right? Like the simple ones, they click on it every single time. That's the clicker. Um, the other ones like the I'll let Andrew do the tinfoil hat. I'll take the expert. So the expert, like the one that is like, I am a master of all things. I put in a home network, therefore I'm qualified to manage the network for this corporation because I've got my home network in place, right? So they think that they know more than they do and have this persona of I'm qualified and I shouldn't have to have these controls in place because I know better and I wouldn't do that anyways.
the Dunning-Kruger effect kind of thing.
Exactly, right? Like you're not as good as you think you are. Um, they're dangerous, right? Because they have they tend to have access to more things, right? Like that's the engineer. The engineers are the experts, right? They have access to intellectual property. They have probably access to a lot of files and folders. They click on something and your business comes to a screeching halt. So you want to take tinfoil, the tinfoil hat?
Yeah, so tinfoil hat, and this I think we rank this as probably the most dangerous because it really decays the security culture of a company. So this is a staff member who, for various political, religious, personal reasons, says security, I don't have to do that. Big brother's not going to watch me. You can't control me. And ultimately, none of us care, what this person does at their personal level, but in a work environment, they just don't want to conform to the security practices. So they are adverse to security. They usually generate a lot of complaints, a lot of friction. They oftentimes can overwhelm smaller business leaders with they're just consistent and persistent, absolute denial of doing security. And so security holes open around these people. They generally have activities that they think are fine and something comes through. And so, if monkey see, monkey do, if one person says, oh, if that guy did it, I can do it again. And so now you suddenly have like an army of tinfoil hat people in your company that have created all these vulnerabilities in your security tools because they refuse to use them. You're an easy target. And
Yeah.
so what I tell business owners is, this is your asset, and ultimately the profitability and the value of this asset, your business, is yours. Are you willing to let Mr. Tinfoil Hat wearer encumber you with risk that could potentially lose you your business, lose you a year of profit, lose you even a quarter of profit? As a business owner, I'm not okay with that. I don't hire staff that can, shut me down, and I don't tolerate that. So it's a really challenging personality type.
Well, we put this together because sometimes people use their head to think about this, their mind to think about this, and they say, "Oh, you know, I recognize that there could be potential downtime. Let's figure out what that could be," and that's how they assess the situation and the risk. There's other folks that are more emotional leaders and more tied to their heart and easier to spot behaviors. And so we wanted to give you both of these. Like, hey, if you notice these behaviors or you joke about these behaviors inside of your office, these are some profiles that could be risky. The other thing that we wanted to do was look at calculating the cost of downtime. So you had this math. We did this in another security webinar, but I want to give us a little bit of time and then we'll go in Q&A. We're going to run a little bit over, but I wanted to go through this. And maybe Andrew, you could take this one and walk people through. How do you look at downtime and how do you calculate the cost of it?
Yeah. So when I talk about IT with a customer or a prospect, one of the things I like to talk about is that from an IT standpoint, we are there to help them with three things: help them increase their revenue through like technical strategy and scalability, help them keep their operational costs down through efficiency, and we're there to help them protect their profit. And so we use technology tools to deliver those three results. And so in this situation, we're talking about an impact to all three of those avenues. So you lose revenue in a downtime, right? You're potentially not processing orders. Maybe a customer doesn't want to work with you because they fear that you're not safe. You have operational expense because you have staff and facilities sitting idle, so they're not producing any value. And ultimately, no revenue and cost equals no profit. So you don't have that at the end. We do have the calculation here. I would highly recommend the other webinar, which we go into great detail. But ultimately, what you want to do is you want to look at your revenue per hour, times your lost hours, and that will give you some basic measurements to start with. You then want to calculate your staffing costs. So your average hourly wage times number of employees times 8 hours a day, which would be like a traditional 1 day outage. For your operational, calculate your rent, your fixed costs like your internet, your electricity, your trash. You divide that by the 20 working days per month, and that gives you your downtime for that day. You add all three of those together, and that gives you what we call your single day burn rate. And that's really the cost that you have, that's at risk. That revenue is at risk for you to lose, or that profit is at risk for you to lose. And so, that's when we start the discussion on how to protect that. We don't care about the technology tools. We want to protect your burn rate so that you don't have to have that happen, or we can make it as small as possible.
Oh, thank you for going through that. I know we're over time a little bit, so I'm sorry for cutting people short. Um, We typically have some time for Q&A. We've gone a little bit long today. I don't know if we have any questions out there, Andrew, if we want to go through those
I'm
today.
not seeing any questions today, but what I would say is if someone does have a question, Grant and I love doing this. We love these conversations. We'd love to chat with you. If you want us to give you some guidance and some suggestions on your own specific scenarios, use this QR code and have an opportunity to book a time with Grant. Amazing technical consultation, 25 plus years of IT experience. You get on a call with him for 30 minutes to an hour, you'll have received thousands of dollars worth of value, not only in like consulting time, which is complimentary in that call, but actually potential business strategy changes. So a real value for anyone attending this webinar.
Excellent. And I want to just say thank you guys both for this valuable information. You guys continue to bring it every time we have a conversation, and there's always something new to learn. Go out to scan this QR code, go out to the website, or excuse me, to YouTube, our YouTube channel, and our website at succurri.com. And subscribe to our videos. Keep in touch. We do this once a month, so it's not you're not going to get bombarded with it. And we're very careful about the topics we choose that are valuable to your business first, and we try to talk tech secondly. It's all about what's the business outcomes you're looking for, and definitely having a secure business is one of those. So thank you very much, and I appreciate everybody's time.
Thank you. Have a great day.
Yep. Thank you, Tony.